ancient text. Stay tuned, because we're about to embark on a journey like no other. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to Bible Stories, hit the like button, and let us know in the comments if you want more in-depth explorations like this. And don't forget to share this video with your church group, family, and friends, so we can continue uncovering the profound mysteries hidden within the ancient scriptures. Imagine if the Bible we know today isn't telling the whole story. What if there were missing details about the creation of the world, the lives of the patriarchs, and even the laws given by God? Enter the Book of Jubilees, an ancient text that's preserved in the Ethiopian Orthodox Bible. It claims to fill in those missing pieces, revealing hidden stories and adding deeper layers to God's divine plan. But there's a twist. The Book of Jubilees was banned from most of the Christian world. Why was it excluded? And what secrets does it hold that were deemed too controversial? In today's video, we're going to explore the mysterious Book of Jubilees, also known as Little Genesis. This ancient text contains 50 chapters packed with details missing from the mainstream Christian Bible. It offers a cosmic perspective on the Genesis story, diving deep into how angels, divine time, and hidden commandments were given to humanity. But it doesn't stop there. The Book of Jubilees even claims that our modern understanding of the calendar is flawed, revealing a sacred structure of time that most people don't follow today. So, why did early Christians reject this ancient text? What hidden truths were considered too radical to be included in mainstream Christianity? The Book of Jubilees begins by revisiting the creation story we know from Genesis. But it doesn't just reiterate the narrative, it expands it. According to Jubilees, when God created the world, he didn't just bring life into existence. He established the very structure of time itself. This concept, known as sacred time, isn't merely about counting days. It's about aligning our lives with God's divine order. Jubilees introduces a precise solar calendar, overseen by heavenly angels, which governs the universe's cosmic cycles. This calendar isn't just a tool for measuring time. It's a way to live in harmony with God's will. The Book of Jubilees claims that humanity was meant to follow a solar calendar made up of 364 days, divided into 4 seasons of exactly 91 days each. This perfect system ensures that sacred days like the Sabbath and festivals always fall on the correct date. However, this divine calendar has largely been forgotten by the rest of the world. In contrast to the traditional lunar calendar, which is irregular and leads to shifting sacred dates, the solar calendar of Jubilees is seen as a way to realign with God's intended order. Before the creation of the world, Jubilees reveals that God created angels on the very first day. These angels were given specific roles in maintaining the universe's order, including overseeing the movements of the heavens and acting as messengers of God's laws. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes the role of these angels in ensuring the sun, moon, and stars follow their divine paths. This concept of angels controlling cosmic order is echoed in other ancient texts, but Jubilees takes it further by connecting the angels' duties to the regulation of time and seasons. The book even cites that when humanity falls out of sync with God's time, chaos ensues. One of the most controversial aspects of the Book of Jubilees is its insistence on the importance of following a solar calendar. According to the text, the lunar calendar, adopted by many ancient cultures, including the Israelites, leads to spiritual disorder and is considered a deviation from God's will. Jubilees describes the solar calendar as consisting of 364 days, divided into 52 perfect weeks, and each season, spring, summer, fall, and winter, contains exactly 13 weeks or 91 days. This is strikingly similar to the Ethiopian calendar, which is still used today by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, raising the question, could the Ethiopian calendar be one of the few modern systems still reflecting the sacred time described in Jubilees? The Book of Jubilees reaffirms the 6-day creation narrative found in Genesis, but it goes into more detail about the Sabbath. According to Jubilees, God not only rested on the 7th day, but he also sanctified it as a divine institution and an eternal law for both humans and angels. The Sabbath is seen as the foundation of time, a day set apart from the beginning of creation, meant to be observed forever. This ties into the book's larger structure of time, including Jubilee cycles of 49 years, which are intended to bring the world back into harmony with God's order through rest and renewal. In Jubilees, Adam's creation on the sixth day is accompanied by specific commandments given to him by God. These included observing the Sabbath, maintaining purity, and upholding laws concerning marriage and worship. According to the text, these laws were delivered by angels and meant to be observed by Adam and his descendants as part of the covenant with God. This angelic interaction emphasizes that God's laws are not just human inventions, but are part of a divine and heavenly order. The Book of Jubilees also provides additional insights into the story of Cain and Abel. While Genesis briefly mentions Cain killing Abel, Jubilees delves into the consequences of this first major breach of God's law. The text emphasizes the spiritual consequences of Cain's sin while portraying Seth, Adam's third son, as the continuation of humanity's righteous line. Seth is shown as a figure of righteousness who is taught to follow the laws handed down by angels, laying the foundation for later descendants, including Noah, to continue the covenant with God. When it comes to the story of Noah and the flood, Jubilees offers additional revelations about the corruption of the earth, particularly focusing on the Nephilim, giants born from the union of fallen angels and human women. While Genesis briefly mentions these giants, Jubilees elaborates on their impact, describing how their actions contributed to the moral decay that led to the flood. According to Jubilees, these Nephilim introduced forbidden knowledge, disrupted the natural order, and increased lawlessness, which prompted God to cleanse the earth. While Genesis briefly mentions these giants, Jubilees elaborates on their impact, describing how their actions contributed to the moral decay that led to the flood. According to Jubilees, these Nephilim introduced forbidden knowledge, disrupted the natural order, and increased lawlessness, which prompted God to cleanse the earth. The Book of Jubilees is filled with details that were excluded from the mainstream Christian Bible. From its depiction of a sacred solar calendar to its revelations about angels, commandments, and the consequences of deviating from divine order, this ancient text offers a unique perspective on biblical events. Its exclusion from the Christian canon raises questions about what other hidden truths might exist and what impact they could have on our understanding of God's divine plan. If you're curious about these ancient revelations, let us know in the comments if you want to see more in-depth explorations of the secrets and stories hidden within the Book of Jubilees. Should we dive deeper into the ancient commandments passed down from the earliest days of creation? Let us know. After the Great Flood, God didn't just make a promise to Noah to never flood the earth again. He also formed a new covenant with Noah, which included specific laws of purity and sacrifice. According to the Book of Jubilees, these laws were intended to help humanity maintain holiness and prevent the corruption that had led to the flood in the first place. These commandments were later formalized for the Israelites, but they were initially given to Noah as part of this covenant. A crucial detail found in Jubilees is that Noah was instructed to observe the Sabbath and adhere to the same laws given to Adam regarding sacrifices and purity. This covenant marked a new beginning for humanity and highlighted the importance of remaining obedient to God's laws to avoid further judgment. The Book of Jubilees reveals that Noah was already following sacrificial laws, which would later be detailed in the Mosaic Law. Noah received instructions on how to offer burnt offerings to God and how to remain pure in body and spirit. These actions set a precedent for maintaining a holy relationship with God even before Moses arrived on the scene. In the biblical account of Genesis, we are introduced to Abraham when God calls him to leave his homeland and travel to Canaan. However, the Book of Jubilees adds a whole new layer to Abraham's story, delving into his youth and revealing an early act of defiance against idolatry. According to Jubilees, Abraham grew up in a family steeped in idol worship, as his father, Terah, worshipped false gods. This detail is not mentioned in Genesis, but Jubilees describes a young Abraham who actively rejected the pagan practices around him. In one vivid scene, Abraham questions his father, saying, "My father, tell me what this idol is that you worship." And upon realizing that the idols were mere images of stone, he burned them in front of everyone and fled into the wilderness. Jubilees 11:16-17. while Genesis focuses on Abraham's obedience to God's call to leave his home. Jubilees portrays him as a revolutionary figure who boldly stood against the idolatry of his time. This act of spiritual rebellion set the stage for Abraham's future role as the father of a chosen people who would reject pagan practices and follow God's laws. One of the most striking differences between Genesis and the Book of Jubilees is the portrayal of Abraham as someone who followed divine laws long before Moses' time. In Genesis, we don't see Abraham receiving laws other than the covenant of circumcision mentioned in Genesis 17. However, in Jubilees, Abraham is depicted as already observing the Sabbath, making sacrifices, and following laws typically associated with Moses. These commandments, according to Jubilees, were not invented during Moses' era, but were passed down by angels to the patriarchs, beginning with Adam. Abraham, in particular, received these divine instructions from the angels and was expected to follow them as part of his covenant relationship with God. In Jubilees 12:25, it is noted that he was taught by the angels concerning the things written in the tablets of heaven, which implies that Abraham's adherence to these laws was part of a larger cosmic plan. Unlike the Genesis account, which focuses on Abraham's individual faith journey, Jubilees presents him as a figure within a grander divine order that governs both heaven and earth. One significant moment in Abraham's story is the covenant of circumcision, which is described in Genesis 17. God commands Abraham to circumcise himself and all the males in his household as a sign of the covenant. However, Jubilees takes this one step further by revealing that this act of circumcision wasn't just a symbolic gesture. It was part of a cosmic law inscribed on the heavenly tablets. According to Jubilees, circumcision was not merely a sign for Abraham's descendants. It was a divine law that had existed since the creation of the world. This covenant was described as an eternal ordinance that was ordained and written on the heavenly tablets, Jubilees 15:25. In Genesis, the emphasis is on Abraham's obedience to God's command. In contrast, Jubilees portrays this act as a means of aligning oneself with the cosmic laws that govern the universe. Circumcision is not just a physical sign in Jubilees. It is a spiritual act that connects individuals with a divine order that has existed since the beginning of time. The story of Abraham and Isaac, known as the binding of Isaac or the Akedah, is one of the most powerful moments in Genesis, Genesis 22 verses 1 to 19. God tests Abraham's faith by asking him to sacrifice his son, Isaac. However, the Book of Jubilees adds additional layers to this narrative. In Jubilees, the test is not just a personal trial between Abraham and God. It's part of a larger spiritual warfare. Jubilees introduces the figure of Mastema, who is associated with Satan, as the one who suggests this test to God, hoping that Abraham will fail. Mastema represents the forces of evil that are constantly seeking to undermine the righteous. Jubilees adds that angels intervened during the binding, and God allowed the test to demonstrate that Abraham's faith was greater than the temptations of evil. And I stood before him and before the prince of the Mastema, and the Lord said, "Command him not to lay his hand on the lad, nor to do anything to him, for I have shown that he fears the Lord." Jubilees 18:10. This version of the story introduces a whole new spiritual dimension, presenting it not just as a test of Abraham's faith, but as part of a cosmic struggle between good and evil forces. In Genesis 25 verse 23, we learn that before Jacob and Esau were born, God revealed to their mother, Rebekah, that the two brothers would become the heads of two nations, and that the older, Esau, would serve the younger Jacob. The Book of Jubilees expands on this prophecy, emphasizing that it wasn't just a family feud. It was part of a larger cosmic design. According to Jubilees, Jacob was always meant to inherit the blessing and continue the line of righteousness that began with Abraham. The text adds an element of predestination, revealing that Jacob was chosen from birth to carry on the covenant, while Esau was destined to stray from God's plan. The book even notes that Isaac and Rebekah were given divine knowledge about Esau's rebellious nature and his future descendants' opposition to Israel. The Lord said unto her, "Two nations shall be divided from your womb, and one nation shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. Jubilees 19:13. This mirrors the Genesis account, Genesis 25 verse 23, but adds a layer of divine foreknowledge and predestination. In the Genesis narrative, we witness the struggle between Jacob and Esau through Jacob's cunning and Esau's impulsive nature. However, Jubilees suggests that Jacob's actions, although deceptive, were part of fulfilling a divine plan. Esau is portrayed not just as a brother who lost his birthright, but as a representative of rebellion against God's chosen people. Esau's descendants, the Edomites, would become a nation that repeatedly opposed Israel, fulfilling the prophecy that the elder would serve the younger. In Jubilees, the hostility between Esau and Jacob is not only a family conflict. It reflects a larger cosmic struggle between righteousness, represented by Jacob, and rebellion, represented by Esau. The text even describes how Esau took his family and possessions and moved to the hill country of Seir, establishing himself as a nation in opposition to Jacob's descendants. Jubilees 37:1, Genesis 36 verse 8. Finally, one of the most significant moments in Jacob's life is when he receives his father Isaac's blessing. In Genesis, this blessing secures Jacob's position as the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. Genesis 27. However, Jubilees goes further by emphasizing that Jacob received not just a blessing, but also a continuation of the divine laws that had been passed down from Abraham. After receiving the blessing, God and the angels revealed to Jacob the laws that he and his descendants were to follow, including the observance of the Sabbath, purity laws, and the sacred calendar laws that would later be formalized in the Mosaic Law. And the Lord appeared to him by night and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land whereon you are sleeping, I give to you and your seed shall be as the stars. This encounter was not just about securing land. It was about passing on the divine order and laws that had been given to the patriarchs. Jacob was tasked with ensuring that his descendants, the future Israelites, would follow these laws as part of their covenant relationship with God. The vision of Jacob's ladder in Genesis, described in Genesis 28 verse 12, is a pivotal moment when God makes a promise to Jacob. In the Book of Jubilees, this vision and the laws revealed to Jacob are part of a grander cosmic order that governs both heaven and earth. Jacob is not merely receiving a birthright. He becomes the inheritor and custodian of divine commandments linked to the heavenly tablets mentioned earlier in the text. The Book of Jubilees elevates Jacob's role beyond what is detailed in Genesis by showing him as a crucial figure in preserving God's eternal commandments. Jubilees does not stop at the rivalry between Jacob and Esau. Instead, it expands this conflict into a prophetic vision of an ongoing struggle between their descendants. The text suggests that the nations that arise from Esau will continue to oppose the descendants of Jacob, the Israelites, throughout history. This conflict is more than a mere personal feud between two brothers. It ties into a spiritual battle between righteousness, represented by Jacob and Israel, and rebellion, represented by Esau and Edom. The prophetic struggle is not only about territorial disputes, but also forms part of a greater cosmic war between the forces of good and evil. In the Book of Jubilees, this enmity is emphasized when Jacob and his sons descend into Egypt to join Joseph, while Esau's sons remain in the land of Edom. The book notes that the hostility between these nations endures, symbolizing a broader spiritual opposition. This ongoing struggle is linked to an apocalyptic vision, where the descendants of Esau remain enemies of God's chosen people, reflecting a spiritual battle that resonates throughout biblical history. As we move forward, the birth of Jacob's 12 sons through his wives Leah and Rachel and their maidservants forms a significant narrative in Genesis. These sons, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, and Benjamin, become the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel. However, in Jubilees, their births are seen as part of a predetermined plan set by God, aligning with the sacred calendar. The book emphasizes that each son's birth was divinely scheduled, aligning with the cosmic order, and their destinies were recorded on the heavenly tablets. While Genesis provides a narrative account of the births, Jubilees reinforces the idea that these events were preordained, linking the 12 tribes to God's broader plan for the world. Each tribe is portrayed not merely as an inheritor of land, but as a custodian of God's commandments, responsible for preserving divine laws through the generations. The emphasis on the heavenly tablets reinforces the idea that these births were not random, but were part of God's eternal design. One critical moment in the narrative is Reuben's sin. Reuben, the eldest son of Jacob, loses his status as the firstborn after committing a grave transgression, as mentioned in Genesis 35, verse 22. In Jubilees, this event is given even greater significance. Reuben's actions are seen not only as a personal failing, but also as a violation of divine laws that had been established long before. This spiritual transgression disqualifies Reuben from leading the tribes, paving the way for Judah to emerge as the tribal leader and Levi to take on the priesthood, according to God's cosmic plan. The Book of Jubilees emphasizes that Judah's rise is part of God's eternal law, while Levi's appointment to the priesthood is framed as part of a cosmic mandate inscribed on the heavenly tablets. Levi is set apart to offer sacrifices and mediate between the people and God, reflecting an eternal responsibility that connects heaven and earth. This portrayal elevates the Levitical priesthood beyond a mere tribal duty, showing it as an integral part of God's preordained order. As the story progresses, the 12 sons of Jacob become the heads of the 12 tribes, and their journeys unfold in Genesis as they eventually settle in the Promised Land. However, in Jubilees, the tribes are portrayed as more than just recipients of land. They are depicted as guardians of God's commandments, tasked with upholding divine laws passed down from Abraham and Isaac. Each tribe carries a specific spiritual responsibility, emphasizing their cosmic role in preserving God's divine order for all generations. In Genesis, we see the brothers selling Joseph into slavery due to their jealousy over their father's favoritism, as described in Genesis 37. However, Jubilees reframes this event by emphasizing its cosmic implications. The brothers' act of betrayal is seen as more than a family dispute. It is portrayed as a great transgression against God's divine order. Their sin is recorded on the heavenly tablets, and they are warned that their descendants will suffer unless they repent for this grave sin. This concept of the heavenly tablets adds a layer of spiritual depth to their actions, linking the brothers' betrayal to the future suffering of Israel under Egyptian bondage. Their transgression disrupts the divine plan and places them under God's judgment. The Book of Jubilees connects this betrayal to the larger cosmic framework, emphasizing that the consequences of their actions would extend beyond the immediate narrative. Joseph's rise to power in Egypt, as described in Genesis 41, is attributed to his wisdom and ability to interpret dreams. However, Jubilees expands on this by showing that Joseph's success was not merely due to his abilities. Instead, it was part of a divine plan written on the heavenly tablets. The book suggests that Joseph's role in Egypt was preordained as part of God's design to create the conditions that would eventually lead to the Exodus. Joseph's life is portrayed as a key event in God's larger plan for the deliverance of Israel, highlighting the importance of his role in fulfilling divine prophecy. Jubilees also introduces the involvement of angels in Joseph's journey. While Genesis portrays Joseph as having a close relationship with God through his dreams, Jubilees goes further by describing how angels were sent to guard and guide Joseph. These angels played a crucial role in ensuring Joseph's safety and success, adding a spiritual layer of protection to his story. From the moment he was sold into slavery, angels were with him, ensuring that he fulfilled his divine purpose in Egypt. One of the most significant differences between Genesis and Jubilees is the way Joseph's life is connected to the broader narrative of the Exodus. In Genesis, Joseph's role ends with his family settling in Egypt. However, in Jubilees, Joseph's life is portrayed as prophetic, foreshadowing the eventual enslavement and deliverance of Israel. Joseph's rise to power is seen not just as an act of personal success, but as part of God's grand design, which would lead to Israel's redemption. According to Jubilees, Joseph was aware of the future bondage of his descendants and played a role in preparing them for their eventual deliverance. His life is portrayed as a transition, marking the beginning of Israel's enslavement, but also offering a prophetic promise of their future redemption. Joseph's final words to his brothers emphasize this connection to the cosmic plan, as he assures them that God will eventually bring them out of Egypt, fulfilling his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In conclusion, the Book of Jubilees adds a cosmic dimension to the stories of the patriarchs and their descendants, framing their lives as part of a grand divine plan. From Jacob's role as the custodian of God's laws to the prophetic significance of Joseph's rise in Egypt, Jubilees emphasizes the connection between the patriarchs' actions and the cosmic order governed by God. By linking these events to the heavenly tablets, the text provides a deeper spiritual context for understanding the struggles, sins, and triumphs of the patriarchs and their descendants. The Book of Jubilees ties Joseph's life directly into God's grand cosmic plan of redemption, which would eventually be fulfilled through the Exodus. In the Book of Genesis, the narrative of Israel's enslavement begins when a new Pharaoh comes to power, one who did not know Joseph and thus began oppressing the Israelites, as described in Exodus 1 verses 8 to 14. However, in Jubilees, this period of bondage is not merely portrayed as a historical occurrence, but as a part of a preordained prophecy written on the heavenly tablets long before these events unfolded. According to Jubilees, God had already foretold Israel's suffering in Egypt, and it was integrated into his plan to lead them toward the miraculous Exodus and the ultimate giving of the Mosaic Law. This prophetic plan is tightly woven into Joseph's role in bringing Israel to Egypt. While Joseph's actions saved the Israelites from famine, their time in Egypt was predestined to result in enslavement, which would, in turn, serve as a stage for God to demonstrate his immense power in delivering his chosen people. The Book of Jubilees highlights that Israel's time in Egypt, their subsequent suffering, and their eventual deliverance were all pre-written to magnify God's name. It was written on the heavenly tablets that they would be oppressed in Egypt, and that God would bring them out with great power and wonders, so that his name would be glorified. Jubilees 48:1. This view redefines Israel's journey in Egypt as not merely a historical series of events, but as part of a broader spiritual narrative where their oppression and subsequent deliverance were preordained to showcase God's glory. Jubilees frames Israel's suffering as a necessary trial to prepare them to receive the laws at Mount Sinai. In Exodus, God's direct intervention is evident through the dramatic plagues he sends to force Pharaoh to release the Israelites. Exodus 7-12. But Jubilees adds a deeper layer to this by portraying these events as part of a spiritual battle. According to Jubilees, the enslavement of Israel is not just an earthly matter. It is part of a cosmic struggle involving spiritual forces. A figure named Mastema, who is often associated with Satan, actively works to harden Pharaoh's heart and increase the suffering of the Israelites. Mastema and his evil spirits are described as urging the Egyptians to further oppress Israel, attempting to lead them away from their faith in God. The text describes this opposition, saying, "The prince of the Mastema stood against them and sought to destroy them with hard bondage and to cause them to forsake their faith in the Lord." Jubilees 48:9. This spiritual aspect adds a cosmic dimension to the story of Israel's enslavement, showing that it wasn't merely a political struggle. It was part of an ongoing battle between the forces of good and evil. Each plague sent by God is not only a form of divine judgment against Pharaoh, but is also portrayed as part of this larger cosmic war, with Mastema attempting to obstruct Israel's path to freedom. The Book of Jubilees introduces the heavenly tablets as central to God's plan. These tablets hold the divine laws and the timeline of the events leading up to the Exodus, including their predestined liberation from Egypt. According to Jubilees, the Exodus was not simply a reaction to Israel's suffering. It had been carefully timed and written into the cosmic calendar. The book emphasizes that Israel's deliverance was not a random event, but one synchronized with a divine timeline that had been set in place since the beginning of creation. Jubilees makes this clear by stating, "It was written on the heavenly tablets that on the 14th day of the first month at the appointed time, God would bring Israel out of Egypt, for this was the day set apart from the beginning of creation. Jubilees 49:1. This unique detail sets Jubilees apart from the narrative in Exodus, where the focus is more on the unfolding events of the plagues. In Jubilees, the timing of the Exodus is portrayed as part of a cosmic timeline, connecting Israel's deliverance to the sacred rhythms of the universe. This makes the Exodus not just a historical moment, but an integral part of the spiritual fabric of creation itself. The 10 plagues in Exodus 7-12, are portrayed as God's dramatic display of power to compel Pharaoh to release the Israelites. However, in the Book of Jubilees, these plagues are imbued with additional cosmic significance. They are not only acts of divine punishment, but also represent a broader struggle against the gods of Egypt and the spiritual forces that upheld them. Each plague, according to Jubilees, serves to demonstrate that the God of Israel is the supreme power over both heaven and earth, and it disempowers the false gods of Egypt, exposing them as powerless. The text states, "The Lord sent the plagues upon Egypt not only to judge Pharaoh, but to show that the gods of Egypt were nothing before him, for they were false powers unable to stand before the Almighty." Jubilees 48:11. This interpretation presents the plagues as a series of symbolic acts that undermine both the physical and spiritual forces opposing God's people. Jubilees also suggests that Mastema and his evil forces were working to harden Pharaoh's heart and prevent Israel's liberation. God's interventions, therefore, are not only targeting Pharaoh, but also the spiritual forces working against Israel's freedom. This view adds a new dimension to the narrative, presenting the plagues as part of a cosmic battle where God's victory extends beyond the physical realm into the spiritual. In the Book of Exodus, Moses receives the law directly from God at Mount Sinai. Jubilees, however, offers a different perspective by emphasizing that these laws were not created in that moment. According to the Book of Jubilees, the laws given to Moses had already been inscribed on the heavenly tablets long before Moses' time. These tablets serve as a cosmic record of all of God's laws, which were established at the beginning of creation. They guide both angels and humans, indicating that the laws were not just for the nation of Israel, but part of a divine order governing the entire universe. Jubilees asserts, "The law and the testimony were ordained and written on the heavenly tablets created even before the foundation of the world, so that they might guide all the generations of the children of Israel." Jubilees 6:17. This perspective presents the Mosaic Law not as a new set of rules given to the Israelites, but as an eternal and preordained code that was always meant to be revealed at the right time. This cosmic context elevates the laws given to Moses, presenting them as part of a grand design that had been in place since the creation of the world. One of the most intriguing aspects of Jubilees is its assertion that the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, were already observing many of the laws later formalized in the Mosaic Law. While the traditional Bible portrays the patriarchs as righteous individuals, it does not explicitly state that they received and followed a full set of divine laws. In contrast, Jubilees claims that the patriarchs observed the Sabbath, performed sacrifices, and adhered to various purity and dietary laws long before they were officially given to Moses. According to Jubilees, the patriarchs received these commandments through divine revelation and the guidance of angels. For example, the text describes Abraham as following the Sabbath and other commandments long before they were codified at Sinai. For Abraham kept the Sabbath, circumcised his sons, and followed the commandments of the Lord that were written on the heavenly tablets, and the law was revealed to him through the angels of God. Jubilees 16:28. This portrayal presents the Mosaic Law not as a new development, but as a restoration of the timeless code given to all the righteous from Adam onward. Moses was simply chosen to deliver the complete version of this divine law to the nation of Israel. Jubilees also places a unique emphasis on the observance of time. In the book, the proper keeping of the Sabbath, festivals, and Jubilee years is seen as central to the divine order. These time